Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students. This is Safir Hussain back again with another lecture for your subject Introduction to English Literature 2, in which we are talking about English novel. So far we have discussed the definitions of English novel, its elements and its rise and development till 18th century. Inshallah, before moving on to post 18th century novels or novels after 18th century, we shall today see some pioneers or some founders of the English novel in the 18th century. So let's begin with the first novelist of the 18th century, who is Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe's life span ranges from 1660 to 1731. He was born in London and he worked as a merchant. He also worked as a manufacturer, a public official and an editor, and he assumed the responsibilities of a merchant, manufacturer, etc. Before becoming a writer. And he became a writer, he started writing at the age of 58. So before 58 he did these many jobs. His most important or famous novels are Robinson Crusoe, which he published in 1719, and Moll Flanders, which followed Robinson Crusoe in 1722. And a critic named Sanders, he writes in his book on page 307 that Daniel Defoe is the first true master of English novel. He is also considered to be the founder of English novel by some critics, and somehow the rest of the critics, they do not consider him to be the founder of English novel. But this is a debate, and in literature we have so many debates, we cannot be sure who is who and what is what. So he is credited for inventing or creating the journalistic first person narrative. And in journalistic writing, you know that a journalist reports events and incidents and accidents, and first person narrative is a narrative or a story or a tale written in the first person pronoun, in which the narrator or the person who is telling the story is himself or herself part of that story. Is that person is one of the characters in the story. So that is first person narrative, in which you use I and we as pronouns. So he was the first writer to popularize journalistic first person narrative, and he presented fiction as fact, something not true as something true or reality. And that is one of the consequences or results of first person narration, because it the readers, they believe that, or they think that this story might be true because the person who is talking about those events is himself or herself part of those events. And this because of this first person narration, realism is considered to be present in that piece of story. And a piece of story which presents reality, we say that this piece of writing has realism in it because it presents reality. But Defoe did not present reality. He wrote about fiction or untrue things, but he presented them as reality. That's why he is said to be originators or founders of the technique of realism as well, and that is because of the first person narration. And there is a debate about his novels. Some critics consider his writings as pure or true novels, whereas some writers, they consider his writings as romances, and we have talked about romances earlier. But whatever be the case, whether his writings are novels or romances whatsoever, Daniel Defoe influenced many future writers who wrote autobiographical novels or novels in the first person, and they were all influenced by Daniel Defoe. The next one is Samuel Richardson. You can see his detail here. He was born in 1689 and he lived till 1761, born in Derbyshire, London, and he worked as a printer as well as a clerk, and in his youth he had written 3 love letters to 3 different girls, and he used that experience in writing his novels. The first novel, Pamela or Virtue Rewarded, he had published or written it in 1740s and 41, and in this novel he has used the technique of letters. The 3 love letters he had written, he used the same knowledge in writing this novel Pamela. And Pamela is an epistolary novel, and epistolary novel is a novel which is written in the form of letters. The characters in those novels, they write letters to each other, and the whole novel is composed of letters. Such novels are epistolary novels, and Richardson was the person who invented this kind of novel. And almost all the novels he has written are in epistolary form. They are all in the form of letters. Samuel Richardson considered that novels have or a novelist has 2 purposes, or should have 2 purposes in his mind when he or she is writing novels. The first purpose is to inform the readers, to aware the readers, to give information or awareness to the readers. And the second person is to impart morality, or to give moral values, or to teach moral lessons to the readers. And Richardson is considered to be the first true modern novelist, and his novel Pamela is considered to be the first true modern English novel, because novels are said to be talking about psychological development of characters. And novels, the characteristic of modern novels or true novels is that they should talk about not only the external life of the characters, they should talk about the internal life, or the whatever happens in the minds of the characters, their psychological issues or progresses or development. So Pamela talks about the psychological development of the main character, whose name is also Pamela, and that's why it is said to be the first true modern novel. Whereas the first novel of Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe, has been written or published many years earlier than the first novel of Samuel Richardson. Robinson Crusoe has been written in 1719, as you can see, and Pamela has been written in 1740. Rather, the other novel of Daniel Defoe, Moll Flanders, has also been published in 1722 before Pamela, and Pamela is published in 1740. But the novels of Daniel Defoe, they talk about the physical progress or development or external events, and they do not talk about the psychological development of characters or the internal events in the mind or soul of the characters. But Pamela talks about the psychological development. That's why it is said to be the first true modern novel in English literature. And Samuel Richardson is also credited or given credit to have influenced and popularized sentimentality in novels. He has popularized sentimental novels, novels which talk about human emotions in a bit exaggerated form. That is sentimentality, to be sentimental, to be emotional. The next important, or rather the most important novelist of the 18th century is Henry Fielding, who was born in England in 1707 and he died in 1754. He had a short span of life, and he studied law as well. And Fielding is considered to be the father of English novel. And he is considered father because he contributed many things to the English novel, and he was influenced by picaresque modes of writing. Picaresque, the word picaresque has been derived from an Italian word picaro, and picaro means a rogue character. A character who is not completely good, but not completely bad as well, just like a common human person. And a picaresque novel is a novel which talks about such a hero who is not a very good character, but he also has some evil aspects in his personality. Generally, in novels, in movies, or in plays, we have heroes who are completely good. But picaresque heroes are such heroes which are not completely good, rather they live or lead their life using evil means or using wrong actions. And Henry Fielding was opposed or against the sentimental novels written by Samuel Richardson. And Henry Fielding wrote a parody of the novel Pamela by Samuel Richardson. Samuel had written Pamela, and Henry Fielding had written a parody or a criticism of the same novel in the form of another novel named as Shamila. And in the novel Shamila, Henry Fielding criticized that the stories presented by Samuel Richardson are unrealistic and they are not true. They cannot happen in everyday life. They are not realistic. And in Shamila, he has shown a realistic picture of the society. And he is most famous for his novels Joseph Andrews, written in 1749, and Tom Jones, written in 1742. These two are the most famous novels of Henry Fielding. And Henry Fielding is said to be have contributed realism to the novels, which was lacking earlier. Daniel Defoe is also credited to have realism in his novels. Henry Fielding also contributed towards characterization or formation or creation of characters in the novels, and Fielding presents a true and realistic picture of human nature, whereas Richardson presented an ideal or a romantic or what you can say an unrealistic picture of human nature, a sentimental or emotional picture of human nature. And by writing Shamila and Joseph Andrews, Henry Fielding also laid the foundation of comic novels, or novels which have a funny story or a funny plot or a funny ending. So these are the most famous novelists of the 18th century. We have some other novelists as well. The first one is Lawrence Sterne, and he was born in Ireland. He was an Irish novelist who lived from 1713 to 1768. He was a Cambridge graduate, a graduate from Cambridge University. He became a priest. And Sterne is famous for using or employing different and unique or new techniques in writing novels. Techniques which were not used by any writer before Lawrence Sterne. And his technique involves non-linear plots. His plots are not linear. Linear plots are plots which move in a specific direction. We have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an ending in a proper sequence, a chronological or date-wise sequence. But non-linear plots do not follow a particular sequence in their plot. We do not have proper beginnings or middle and ending. The plot is fragmented or it is twisted. And in his plot, the events are skipped, and sometimes the story jumps in future, sometimes the story jumps in past. So there is a shifting back and forth, forward and backward in time in the story. And because of that, the story is not in a proper sequence. And in that sequence or that form of narration or narrating a story is called fragmented narration, because the story is composed of fragments or pieces, and these pieces are not in proper order. And his famous novel is Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy and Gentleman. And the hero of the novel Tristram Shandy, the hero is born in the fourth or fifth volume, and the whole novel is consisted of 9 volumes. The hero is born in the fourth or fifth volume of the novel. So you can see that the birth of hero should be at the beginning of the novel, but here the birth is in the middle of the novel. And we can call him the pioneer or the founder of stream of consciousness technique. This technique where the plot is not linear, where the story jumps back and forth in future and past, where the story sometimes shifts to past, sometimes shifts to future, and where there is fragmented narration, we call that stream of consciousness technique. We would study about these narration techniques in future in other lectures as well. So if you do not completely understand stream of consciousness technique, you do not need to worry. Some other writers include Tobias Smollett. He is famous for writing satires or criticisms and follies and foibles of ordinary life. Tobias Smollett's novels, they include satire. In his novels, he criticizes various evil aspects of the society, and he also presents the funny things of ordinary life in his novels. And a very important writer, Jonathan Swift, we have mentioned him in other writers because his writings are not considered to be novels or pure or true novels, but his writings are very much famous, and his writings are read throughout the world. Jonathan Swift also wrote satirical writings, and his writings are considered as allegories as well. Allegory is actually a figure of speech in which the writer presents an event in the form of something else. So apparently the characters would be different, the story seems to be different, but through that story and through that characters, the writer is actually trying to point or represent another event, and those stories are allegories. Swift is famous for social criticism, and you might have heard about his writing Gulliver's Travels. So Gulliver's Travels has been written by Jonathan Swift, and Gulliver's Travels, this piece of writing is a severe or very much harsh criticism on our social evils or generally on humans. So these are the famous writers of the 18th century. So if we summarize all this into the chief characteristics of 18th century novels, we see that there is realism in the novels of 18th century, in the novels of Defoe and Henry Fielding. So in realism, the writers explore and represent reality of the society, and mostly the realistic novels are written in first person narration. And the novelists of the 18th century, they also talk about ordinary men and women, common people with familiar settings, and they focus on the middle class people, as we have studied in the previous lectures, that middle class was the rising class or the most focused class in literature in that period of time. And some of the novels, they intend or they try to reform the society as well. They try to teach and purify the society. For example, Richardson Smollett and Swift, etc. Moreover, the 18th century novelists, they gave new avenues, or they showed new ways to the future writers, and they adopted many or invented many new styles in writing novels. For example, Fielding is famous for creating the style of epic novels. Epic novels are novels which talk about historically important figures and such stories which are historically important and which talk about the fates of nations or the destinies of nations, where the whole destiny of nation is dependent on one character or on the hero. Such novels are epic novels. And Richardson introduced epistolary and sentimental novels. We have talked about them. Defoe introduced realistic novels, and Swift, he is credited to have contributed towards satire and philosophical novels. Philosophical novels are novels or writings which talk about certain philosophical debates or issues. And Lawrence Sterne has pioneered experimental novels, or novels which experiment or which contain new techniques. Just like we talked about his technique of non-linear plots and jumping back in future and past, and such twisted or fragmented plots are considered to be experimental plots or experimental novels, because they do not follow the conventional or previous ways of writing. Such novels have new or unique ways of writing. That's why we call them experimental novels. This is all about the 18th century novelists and the chief characteristics of 18th century English novels. Inshallah, in the next forthcoming lectures, we will talk about English novels after the 18th century to the present time, and what changes occurred and what kinds or what sorts of novels were written in the coming days after 18th century. This is all, and thank you very much. If you have questions, confusions, problems, you can ask questions and you can clear your confusions using any medium or any means, using WhatsApp and email and SIS accounts. Thank you very much.